Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Cody Thomas. A Labor Day birthday party began on a boat, clearly with song and laughter, but ended with the death of a family friend. The tragedy of that day, of course, is unquestionable, but were the actions of the defendant, George Pino, criminal? Our big story today is the defense's case getting underway in the boat crash manslaughter trial. Prosecutors accused George Pino of recklessly operating a boat filled with teenage girls before a deadly crash, but now the defense is pushing back, challenging the state's theory of what caused the collision and whether Pino's conduct rose to the level of manslaughter. The day's biggest witness was the defendant's own wife, Cecilia Pino.
Is this at Billy's Point at the sandbar?
Yes.
In the public shop? Showing Fence Exhibit X. Do you recognize the people in this picture?
Yes. Yes.
Who are they?
Carolina, Lucy, Coco, Claudia, and Ceci, and George.
All right, let's bring in our guest this hour to break this down. Criminal defense attorney Silva Megadichian. What a happy, wonderful surprise seeing you today on this Tuesday, Silva. It just makes me so thrilled that you were going to be the guest today. Silva, let's start here. Let's start with this wife on the stand, right? Because she was initially called as a state's witness. Now she was recalled today as a defense witness. Longer on the stand with the defense, a little more emotional with the defense here. What are you making of that? Is there some sort of legal strategy or legal play here that I'm unaware of? Let me get your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, Cody, I love being with you and you're exceptional. So thank you for having me.
Of course.
Here's the thing. I think the defense needed her, right? Because the prosecution had called her. They got what they needed out of her, but the defense really needed to humanize Mr. Pino a lot more. And I think they had to do it with her just to show this was not intentional. This was merely an accident. Again, trying to downplay the alcohol, trying to downplay, the behavior that I think a lot of the jurors would be really upset about. And her emotion, I think, is really important. Now, the prosecution in their cross tried to say, well, look, you got really emotional in when the defense questioned you. Obviously, it's a safe place to answer questions. Nobody wanted this little girl to die and the other one to be so hurt. So I think it was useful and the defense had to do it. Again, for that humanizing element, Cody, that might be missing because the case does cause so much emotion and anger.
Right. I mean, everyone that's involved is looking for somewhere to point the blame. You have a young girl, a young woman that's no longer coming. You have some people that were, permanently damaged from this. So they're looking to point the finger somewhere. And George Pino just happens to be on the other side of that finger right now. But Silva, let me ask you, of course, it makes sense why she's a defense witness. What did the prosecution get out of her here? I mean, she sat there and said this was an accident. Were they just trying to get out, some facts of the day? You were there. You were recording the video to Uptown Girl. Was that just? It was short. Was that all they were trying to get out of her? Just some timeline facts, maybe.
I think it was a bad look, right, Cody? Because again, concentrating on what she was drinking, the fact that she had the 2 glasses, the fact that there were over 60 empty alcohol containers, it's a really bad look. And I think what the prosecution was trying to show is, look, she's testifying on behalf of her husband, but she also allowed a group of girls that were underage to drink alcohol, a lot of it with over 60 empty canisters. I think in their close, they're really going to harp on the idea that this was, look, you don't have to think that he was drunk. In fact, the prosecution even said that's not even an issue. We can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But the fact of the matter is bad choice after bad choice after bad choice. And that kind of takes it away from a mere accident to negligence, to recklessness, to the fact that when you have that much alcohol, that many teenagers driving the wrong way, unsafe speed, not paying attention, this is more than just an accident. This is something more grotesque. And I think they got that. A bad look sometimes is enough for a jury to really dive into the why. And I think that's what the prosecution established with the cross-examination.
Just kind of, maybe not the most responsible parents here. They might not have been drunk, but you're letting a bunch of teenage girls, drink underage. I see where you're going there. Silva, let's take a listen to one of the survivors who took the stand, this girl named Natalia, talking about moments after the crash.
Yes.
I remember it coming out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. I heard a loud hit. I believe I stayed on the boat, so I wasn't ejected. I heard some voices to jump into the water from the boat, so I jumped into the water. And then I remember seeing Big Ceci holding my friend Mia in the water. Mia had some blood on her. I remember Gami Alvarez close to me in the water as well. I remember Mr. Pino with his hands on the boat as it was tipped over at that point. And then a rescue boat came, and I got onto that boat.
And Silva, you listen to this survivor here. Of course, there's a human element that comes with every trial that we cover here at Court TV, especially if there are some parents on that jury thinking about sending their son or daughter out on a boat with who they believe to be, a responsible adult, and then something tragic like this happens. It's just, it's tough to listen to, coming from that sort of view. But Silva, the defense asked to throw this case out. They had that motion for acquittal yesterday, which ultimately was denied. The judge said no, of course. This came after the state rested their case. What do you make of that decision for the judge to throw that out?
It was the right decision, Cody, because look, I think a lot of people can say the prosecution still has not proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. However, it is enough for the case to go forward because, again, I think the key testimony was the fact that there was just really bad choices between the alcohol that was present. You have the adults that nobody was making sure that the boat was actually on the right course. Now, look, the defense said, they were talking about the big wave or this thing, the water condition that could have led to the
boat
accident.
Theory, this wake type of deal, yeah.
Yes. And that's possible, Cody, right? But just as it's also possible that his distraction was more than just an accident. Nobody was looking at the conditions, it looked like. I mean, again, these young girls are not in the position to be boat experts, but the father was. He said, he went this route over 1,000 times. He knew the route like the back of his hand. Then why? It had to be something more than just checking on a back passenger. There was testimony that, he was distracted because he was making sure that two people sitting behind him were safe. Maybe. But I think the real issue is, again, the unsafe speed, the looking out for hazards, the wrong side of the channel, too many teenagers, 60 empty alcohol canisters. That's enough to keep this case going. And it's enough for a juror to say, this was a day that was more than just an accident. This was a father and a mother who should have known better, been more careful. And I always say, Cody, it takes one juror to say, if I'm driving and I'm on my cell phone and I go the opposite lane of traffic and I kill people, what's that liability? There is an argument here that he could be held liable for the recklessness. So the judge made the right decision. Is it beyond a reasonable doubt? That's absolutely up to the jury to decide.
Absolutely. And to your point, Silva, thinking about him talking about, I've been down this route 1,000 times. I was talking about it yesterday, right? The ocean is huge. And this was a stationary marker. It's not like you have, 4,000 markers spread across the ocean. It's just this one thing sitting there and you happen to just hit that one thing. It's not like running a car off the road and you have 200 trees on the side of the road that you could hit. That's where I'm leaning there. It had to be a little bit of something else going on, right? But we'll see. We'll see as the trial continues to progress. Silva, let's take another listen to one of the other survivors, this woman named Claudia, talking about her experience during this crash.
Were you consuming alcohol that day?
Yes.
Do you remember how many drinks you had approximately?
I don't remember exactly how many I had, but I know I had a seltzer and a beer.
When you were at the sandbar, at any point, do you remember if you ever saw Mr. Pino holding an alcoholic drink in his hand?
No.
At some point you said you ended up in the water. Do you remember if anyone said to jump into the water? Did you hear anybody call that out?
Yes. I don't remember exactly who it was, but I know people were telling me I had to get out.
Do you remember if it was a female voice or a male voice that said to jump?
Definitely a female voice.
Okay. One moment, Your Honor. No further questions.
So Silva, you know, alcohol is at the head of this case. And the prosecutors bring up the alcohol. We've seen the picture of the 60 plus cans and bottles and stuff open. We've heard testimony here. These underage girls drinking, you know, having a good time. You know, maybe underage drinking, you know, shouldn't have been allowed. But we've heard officers say that it's not illegal to operate a boat and drink as long as you're not, you know, super impaired. And Silva, on that thought, the thing about it, the officer said, one of the responding officers testified that Mr. Pino did not seem impaired, right? He also refused the field sobriety test, so now we're years removed. They don't have any evidence about that. So, I mean, the state has essentially spent these years suggesting impairment without any, you know, hard evidence of said impairment, which seems to be one of the defense's biggest hinges here. Does that hurt the prosecution as this moves forward?
Oh, of course, Cody. I always say, you know, we always say as defense attorneys, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And I think that's what the prosecution is resting its head at. It's saying, look, he refused the test. First responder said he looked sober. And quite honestly, even in the body cam, he answered questions. He didn't seem like he was completely out of it, right? Even though he was in such a big accident. That does help the defense to say, look, this guy was not drunk and they don't have the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. But again, when you take it together, why this experienced boater would get into such a tragic accident? There will be jurors who say, look, it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it walks like one. This guy obviously was completely inebriated in some capacity. He should not have been behind driving this boat if he was under the influence. Other jurors will say, look, there's no evidence to this. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. This is where jury discussion is going to be key. But there's a lot of evidence that supports that Mr. Pino wasn't necessarily drunk. And the key is, Cody, at the time of driving that boat. And there isn't enough evidence put forward. And as a previous guest had said, and it's very true, as defense attorneys, we always advise our clients, look, say no to the test if you think it could be, you know, beneficial for you. Yeah. And obviously in this case, it was very beneficial for Mr. Pino.
Absolutely. And to that point of advising your clients, Silva Megadici, expertise with criminal defense, would you advise your client, Mr. George Pino, if you're representing him, to take the stand in his own defense? Do you see risk outweighing reward or the other way around? What are you seeing in this particular case here so far?
Oh, Cody, you asked me the $1 million question per usual.
I knew you'd have an answer. I knew you'd have it.
Cody, I talk too much. You know I do. Look, here's the issue. I think here's the problem, that 9 seconds. And I think that is going to be key. Can he explain the gap? Now, here's the thing. If the defense believes that they actually have this case down, that the jury will come back as an accident, they won't need him. And honestly, it really depends. When I'm in trial, I look at my jurors' reactions. Do they seem to be eating out of my hands? Do they seem to be believing my defense arguments? Do they seem to be open to my defense witnesses? Now, it is always a risk. And Mr. Pino, as we all can agree, all your amazing listeners and you, Cody, he's kind of not been acting great during this trial. Between, a lot of viewers have said, the false emotions, between him allegedly staring down the prosecutor, the fact that he does look like kind of a spoiled, wealthy individual just by the way he's been acting. Is it a good look for him to take the stand when I think there might be enough reasonable doubt for at least some of those jurors? And as we know, it only takes one juror to believe this was a mere accident and not negligence. I'm definitely really siding towards him not testifying. But remember, Cody, great defense attorneys will take their clients and go through cross-examination and direct to see how they do. At this point, I don't think it's necessary. I think the defense has a really good chance of honestly, of a hang on this one. I don't see all the jurors coming back with the guilty. But again, Cody, you know me. I am a defense attorney in LA. So I do believe that the defense did a good job with the wife, with the victims on the boat, to talk about how he was trying to do the right thing. And I think that's going to stick in the mind of those jurors as well.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about his behavior here, Silva. Like, I mean, we saw that emotion where the court had to stop. Was it real? Was it not? He might have been trying to get his Oscar. I know you're out there in LA, so you're familiar with all the entertainment going on out there. Maybe he was trying to make an Emmy run. I don't know. Then, the spat between him and the prosecutor. I could see jurors maybe interpreting that as, trying to sway them a certain way. You're trying to put on this mask to make us think, oh man, he's remorseful, where that could backfire. So we'll see. Silva, they'll be back at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning as we continue coverage of this trial. But my friends, stand by, because up next, we head to Alaska for the military marriage murder trial, where we'll pick up with testimony from a detective who found the victim's body by the storm drain. Keep it here on Court TV.